I'd like you to take just a moment and do some real heavy thinking and some soul searching to answer the question of who am I? Just jot down about 20 things that would best describe who you are. And when you're writing down your responses, write them down as if you were giving the answers to yourself and not to me. Okay, as you can see, this chapter 11, seeks to answer such questions as, who are you? What are you like as a person? It's going to help to explore exactly who you are and how you define yourself. And as you know, I am one that has been talking about since the day we met, about your core and knowing yourself and being confident in your thoughts and your actions. So hopefully you were able to jot down some things that answer the question of who am I. By the time you're done with this chapter 11 lecture, you should have a better understanding of who you are and be able to define it much better. The self. Self is really defined as all the characteristics of a person. Your identity defines who you are. And it pretty much represents a synthesis and integration of full understanding between who you are and what your characteristics are. Your personality are those enduring personal characteristics. And finally, self-understanding, I feel, is one of the most difficult traits to achieve. It's the cognitive representation of the self, and it's based on, in part, on roles and membership categories. Basically, once you have that self-understanding, then you're really able to develop your identity. Now, early on, as early as 3 months, you were able to form self-recognition. And that's really being attentive and positive towards one's image. Now, one way to really explore this is using the mirror technique. And that is really when you have an infant or a toddler, more so an infant, if you place them near a mirror, you'll notice that they consistently touch that mirror. And from them touching it, it shows that they recognize themselves. And that's about a year and a half. At that point, you would notice that they would keep touching the glass, and eventually they would either say their name or they'd say baby. So infants do develop a conscious awareness of their bodies by the time they're 2. And you'll notice at the top of the page, there's a YouTube link. You'll have to cut and paste it, but it really shows you this mirror technique and how babies actually learn the concept of self-recognition. The next topic is self-esteem. I find that we talk about this a lot, but we never really take the time to explain it. And if you notice, there's a quote here by Wayne Dyer that I thought was really interesting. And it states, "The more you work at just being yourself, the more likely you'll feel purposeful and significant in your life." Now just think about that. If you do feel like you have a purpose, then obviously you have a higher level of self-esteem, because they do go hand in hand. So self-esteem would be that global evaluation of yourself. And it is also related to happiness. So if you have high self-esteem, then it increases your level of happiness. Individuals that have low self-esteem seem to feel more depressed. And then low self-esteem implicates depression, as I said, which can lead to suicide and or some of the eating disorders that we discussed earlier in this semester. Self-esteem is also related to your perceived physical appearance. So we know that society judges people by the way they look. If you have a strong sense of self-esteem, if you're happy with yourself, you feel like you have a purpose in life, then it really won't, what people say about you won't affect you as much as it would if you had a low level of esteem. I know there have been a lot of discussions around about sports and awards and the meaning of them. So just think about whether or not you feel in elementary school that every child should receive a reward. Let's say it's reading. Do you give gold stars to everybody that has read a book, or do you give gold stars to everybody that has read 5 or more books? Growing up and receiving empty praise for mediocre or poor performance definitely leads to an inflated self-esteem. So basically, if you are getting praised for everything, even poor performance, you're going to have difficulties handling competition and criticism. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but there are children that start playing t-ball at an early age, and they could be, a okay player, but their coaches and their parents are going to talk them up and praise them as if they are the best player out there. And yes, you should support your children, but think about it. A couple of years down the road, when they get cut from that baseball team, there goes their whole level of self-esteem. Because they're going to think, well, I was great enough to play when I was 9 years old. What happened to me now that I'm 12? So basically, I'm not saying that you should not praise your children. But what I'm saying is, instead of telling your child that they are excellent with t-ball, give them some lessons if you think that they need the improvement. Send them to a camp. Let them develop their skills so that the praise will really help build their self-esteem and not inflate it. And this just takes us to the screen of telling you basically that the best way to improve your self-esteem is to learn how to love yourself. So you need to identify the causes of the low self-esteem, and then you need to be able to provide emotional support and opportunities for social approval. Take responsibility for one's own self-esteem. Achieve your goals. Don't just say this is what I want to do. Create the steps to get there. And then finally, develop effective coping strategies. We talked about those in the previous chapter under emotional development. So if you are following the suggestions that are here to improve your self-esteem, you will truly learn how to love yourself.